What is our next subject tonight, Mark?
Well, see, when they first wrote Article 1, Section 8, Congress was supposed to have the power of the purse.
Tax and spending clause that we're talking about right now. Okay, the tax and spending clause was something that's a heavily debated item from the late 1700s after the formation of our country.
With Madison and Hamilton.
And they wrote, weren't they involved with the Federalist Papers?
Right.
And the question was whether or not Congress has the power to tax and then spend the money that's taxed from the population.
And there's actually,
but how is that? Is that still as it is today?
Well, yeah, they haven't changed the writing. They just ignore it completely. There was, basically, I think it was like 13 or 14 enumerated clauses in that article, but there's another 12 or 13 enumerated clauses throughout the Constitution. So basically,
aren't those other clauses used to circumvent the original clauses?
No, there's like little things about post office and education. There's things that are there's about 36 enumerated clauses. In other words, they actually have a number, and you can actually point to them and say, this is where we get our spending power from, right? Now, those enumerated powers are the only things that the federal government's supposed to spend money on, is allowed to. Everything else goes to the states, and basically what goes to the states is police power and health and safety, right? And what the states don't have goes to an individual, right? So the federal government only can spend money on those 36 things. They can spend money on the post office, on the Army, or on the Navy, on interstate commerce. There's just several things
national defense,
treaties,
controlling immigration.
Yeah. So those things, and anything else they spend money on is unconstitutional. So that's basically just racketeering. Any penny that they spend that's not in those enumerated clauses is actually just because they have guns and people are afraid to go up.
Wait a minute. Then how can you have departments like the Department of Education or the Department of Environmental Protection Agency? How can you have these departments where there's that money spent, and how is that being spent? Is that constitutional?
Absolutely not. Those are just gangsters. I mean, they may, under the color of law, they may call themselves the federal government, but those are nothing more than racketeers. There's nothing constitutional about anything they do. Every money they spent, they took by force. And actually, what it comes down to, the people taking that money by force, that's actually human trafficking. Because the definition of human trafficking is to take money by force and force people to work for something for nothing. And so actually, the IRS and the federal government, when they spend money in this unconstitutional manner, if you look at international and national law, they're involved in human trafficking.
Well,
much less being government officials.
Wait a minute. This is a little complicated, so we better start thinking about how if you're talking about Congress has the power to tax,
right?
Congress has the power to spend, but the way you're describing it sounds like everything after tax is actually Congress is being circumvented by all these administrative agencies.
No, but I mean the Constitution is quite clear. The federal government is restricted to spending money on the enumerated clauses.
So why are they spending money on all these other things? Where's education as an enumerated clause?
Because the country's been overthrown. First of all, the votes have been rigged, and the country's been this is no longer a constitutional republic. We're in a de facto, basically a Soviet gulag or a dictatorship. But yeah, nothing they do there is legal or constitutional. That's all gangster and racketeering. They do it because they've got guns and they'll kill you or throw you in prison. But there's really no force of law behind any of that. All those things they're doing, the things in health and welfare, Obamacare, all that, that's all should be done by the states.
Okay, so then wait a minute. So when the individuals in California are all taxed, that all the money from California gets sent to the federal government. It's supposed to be redistributed back to the state of California. You're trying to tell me that's not happening?
Well, there's different political mechanizations and kickbacks that go on with that. And like I'm saying, like we demonstrated before, every time you have a kickback, billions go into the pockets of the politicians, and maybe some of the pocket change falls to the people. But anytime you have some kind of kickback scheme where, okay, we're going to take money from California to pay for someone who needs health care in Florida or something, most of that money gets stolen by the politicians or the unions or whoever's handling
all the middlemen.
All the middlemen. So there's nothing less. If you look at all these things, they're about 95% inefficient. So like for every dollar spent, maybe a nickel goes to the poor person and 95% goes to the person who I felt sorry for that poor person, so I took 95% of his money, feeling sorry for him, right? That's the government job.
Well, I'm glad they felt sorry for him.
Yeah, that's what
at least they felt sorry for him.
That's where they get the money. So anyway, but I think the states have a right to do all these things. There's no enumerated clause on the state. If the state wants to say everyone makes $100 an hour and everyone pays 100% income tax, the state can do that. There's no reason they can't do that. States can do whatever they want. There's no real restriction on it. But the U.S. Constitution puts these restrictions on federal spending, and there's no reason that the federal has invaded the state's prerogative.
Well, that's under the 10th Amendment. The states are protected under the 10th Amendment, supposedly.
Well, the thing is, but it's mainly the enumerated clauses. It's like you can't spend money on that. And so now Congress has been completely usurped, and there's like all these things that, you know, if you don't want Congress to spend something, Congress can't stop spending now. They have no longer control of the purse. Okay, Medicare can't be stopped. You know, border situation can't be stopped. Congress can't withhold funding for this because they're self-funded. In other words, these are like, you know, petty warlords and little fiefdoms and, you know, just people with guns and, you know, they call themselves government agents, but they're nothing more than racketeers. And they, you know, collect these monies and distribute amongst themselves and throw a few pennies to the peasants. You know, that's what they do.
Well, then I have a question. So how is this evolution got to this point, and is there anything that can be done to stop this?
Well, I think the loophole that this all went through was the welfare clause.
The general
welfare clause, and there was huge arguments.
But wasn't the Supreme Court involved with this?
Kennedy was he wants the open-ended general welfare clause. So basically, the general welfare clause says, you know, you're supposed to have a post office, you're supposed to have an army, you're supposed to have a navy, and take care of the general welfare. Now, when most people thought of the general welfare as like if you have a typhoid epidemic or something, you would separate out the sick people and put them on an island so they don't kill everyone. But then the general welfare is like, well, geez, I want to go bowling Monday night, so I need new bowling shoes, and that's part of my welfare. And I want food, so my welfare is food, and so my welfare is I need a place to stay, and I want to take my wife out to dinner, so it's welfare. So basically, the definition of welfare began to be anything I want.
Are we all falling into the entitlement realm when we start going into general welfare?
Well, the thing about entitlements is a slightly different thing. Entitlements are part of the budgets that the voters have no control over anymore.
Yeah, but see, entitlements right now, they've already statistically stated they're around 75-80% of the budget.
Well, it's more than that. Well, in California, it's almost all the budget. I mean, the governor can't change very much of the budget, and the Congress can't change, because these are entitlements, these are fixed every year, so they're never voted on. Mm-hmm. And so, the easiest way to bring it back to somewhat like a free country, but, you know, most people like a benevolent dictatorship as long as the government steals more from their neighbor from them, they feel they're being protected. You know?
Well, I think